People who live together and then get married are more likely to get divorced, not less likely. What the facts reveal is that if the goal is to learn what you need to learn so that you can decide who you should marry more effectively, or learn how to act if you do get married more effectively, and the goal is that your marriage will be better and last, then it doesn't work. And that's a strange truth. And then you might ask yourself, well, why? Why doesn't it work? It's also the case, by the way, that the more sexual partners, the larger the number of sexual partners that someone has had before they get married, the more likely they are to get divorced as well. So I've talked to lots of people. Women who are cohabiting with men are generally not very happy about the fact that the relationship is not moving towards marriage. There's a bunch of reasons for that. Women seem to suffer more emotionally as a consequence of sexual activity outside of a committed relationship. You can imagine why that is. Women experience more negative emotion than men on average in general, but also sex is much riskier for women than it is for men. And so women who are cohabiting are often less than happy about that. And the men who I've talked to about unstable nature of the relationship often say something like, well, we don't need a piece of paper to indicate our commitment. Really a pretty pathetic bit of reasoning. First of all, for someone to say that means they think that what they just said convinces you that all marriage is a piece of paper. And that's a preposterously foolish argument. I mean, at minimum, in the typical marriage ceremony, you make a vow by whatever is holy to you, or at least in front of the state itself, and then in front of your community as you define it, that you're going to make a commitment to someone. And if you think that's nothing, then you're probably the sort of person that the person you asked to marry you should run away from. And then you might ask, well, why do you need to commit to your partner in front of your community and a higher authority, let's say? And the answer is, well, life is really, really difficult, and you're going to have a rough time with your partner no matter how much you love them, because the two of you are different, and you're different sexually, and you're different temperamentally, and so you're not going to see eye to eye all the time, and then horribly difficult things are going to come your way, and the complexity of those difficult things is going to tempt you to pull apart. And exactly when pulling apart might be the worst possible thing for you, and maybe you need that vow before your community and God himself, let's say, or at least the state, and the vow that you've made to yourself and your partner, and the vow that you've made publicly to all your friends to keep you together when the going gets rough. And you might say, well, you don't need that. And I would say, well, that's just because the going hasn't got rough enough for you yet, because when it does get that rough, you'll bloody well know that you needed that. That's for sure. That will definitely happen to you if you marry someone, because all the things that life can throw at you will be thrown at you in the course of a marriage. Okay, so next, what are you telling your partner? Well, as far as I can tell, if you live with someone, here's what you're saying to each other. We both really don't want to take on any more responsibility than necessary. Plus, we both want to have the option of trading up if opportunity comes along. And so why don't we just make do with this provisional arrangement while we cast our eye out into the broader world and see if we can fish something better in. Because living together means something like, well, we're not permanently committed, and not permanently committed means, well, we're impermanently committed, and impermanently committed means we're looking for a better commitment. Well, what kind of basis is that to have a relationship with someone? How are you going to found a relationship on that? Especially an intimate relationship. how's that going to work? It's like, you'll do for now. I don't think that's a very solid foundation to allow you to move forward. And then the next issue is, you're not married if you're living together. And so you might say, well, you're practicing being married. It's like, no, you're not. Why? Because it's not something you can simulate. It's a necessary act of faith. Faith is what makes movement into the unknown possible. And you need to move into the unknown because that's where you're moving, because the future is unknown. You cannot step forward into the unknown without faith. And if you love someone, if you fall in love with someone and you decide to marry them, you don't have the evidence at hand that that's the right person for you. What you have instead is the joint decision that come hell or high water, you're going to struggle forward together. And then you don't even know if that's the right decision. You have to move forward in faith. And then you might say, well, how do you call the best out of yourself and out of your partner, that may be a partner that you're fortunate enough to love? And the answer might be by offering them the gift of faith and by saying, look, flawed as we both are, if we commit to each other, we have the possibility of becoming more than we are. And I'd like to do that with you, even though there's no evidence that it's going to work. But then you might think too, the more deeply you're committed to that faith, the more likely it is to work. And you can't find out what that commitment is without the commitment, and so you can't simulate it by living together, because it's not real. It's not real until you make the commitment. And then I would also say, well, what if you don't make the commitment? Are you free then? Or are you just aimless and hopeless and confused? And you admire people who are committed to something. You sort of wish yourself, when you're feeling aimless and you feel that your life is meaningless, you might think, well, I really wish I was committed to something. Wouldn't it be nice to be committed to something? It's like, well, commit to something then.